We had a ceasefire up until October 7th when thousands of Hamas ran into that country, women by the thousands, Holocaust survivors, and then called home to tell their family how many Jews they.
This video clip is from a debate that was recently hosted by the Free Press. There were a bunch of things that were debated, several topics. One of the topics that was debated was foreign policy, and obviously these days a conversation or a debate about foreign policy is going to at least somewhat venture into the conversation and the topic of Israel and October 7th and Hamas. One of the points that's made here that we'll see is something that I think people don't talk about enough. It's a point that is incredibly important, that doesn't get nearly enough attention. Something else also that comes up, interestingly, is what I would say is maybe the one argument that you could make, or at least argue reasonably in good faith, against the United States giving support to Israel in the war against Hamas. Let's have a listen.
We had a ceasefire up until October 7th when thousands of Hamas ran into that country, women by the thousands, Holocaust survivors, and then called home to tell their family how many Jews they. This is something that America, we've seen it here in our own country. On the morning of September 11th, my uncle, he was a Cleveland firefighter. He left his father's funeral that morning. And by that evening, he was in New York City with his unit. And he spent 2 weeks there, searching through the rubble, searching for his fellow Americans that had been basically put into a blender of concrete. And within 6 years, him and everyone that he went with were dead because of the things that they were exposed to at Ground Zero. So when I see what happened in Israel and what Hamas did to them, they feel the same about us. Everyone that is defending Palestine, especially you young women, if you went over to Hamas right now in Palestine, you would be raped, you would be murdered. Full stop. And we got to stop supporting groups that are anti-American.
I'm America first, and I just want to put America first. We shouldn't be giving foreign aid to any country. That's it. And it's like, people are like, well, what about Israel? They need it. They're the only Western country that's against Islam that exists. We need to protect them. It's like, or some people will say it's in the Bible. And the Bible says, thou shalt give Israel money. It's like, what? What are you talking about, dude? Like, are you insane? Why are people so gung-ho about this? And now I'm getting gung-ho because it's like, why are you gung-ho about this particular issue out of everything? A lot of my Republican friends feel the exact same way. Why are we, so gung-ho about this?
Sam, why do you think that Republicans are so gung-ho in Israel?
Well, I think it's really for our own security. They are our biggest strategic partner when it comes to the U.S. military. Us being able to operate out of Israel, work with their intelligence community. Thanks to Israeli intelligence, the United States has, there's been a lot of attacks prevented on us through Israeli intelligence. And, they have stood with us. And I think it's important that we stand with them. And I understand where you're coming from. Absolutely. I hate seeing money go to other countries.
Yeah.
But
more
when
than
it comes,
any other country in the world.
But when it comes to Israel, it's part of our strategic defense. We need to be able to launch attacks out of that country in case, something goes on with Iran, in case something goes on in some other part of the Middle East. It is absolutely vital for our military to be able to respond from there.
If Iran attacks Israel, should America put troops on the ground against Iran?
That one's a hard one.
See, that's where I would say, as the founder of Young Americans for Peace, I would say no Americans should die in a conflict between two foreign countries.
So I want to talk first about the sort of the back and forth and the debate that happened there in the second half of that clip. And that is, I think, one that's reasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable for someone to say that, we are the United States of America. Our taxpayer dollars, the money that we have collected from taxes from people in this country, should be spent inside of this country on things that this country needs, or that the people in this country need. And if someone is applying an argument like that consistently across the board, and they are, very against foreign aid consistently, period, across the board, and they say that as far as they're concerned, that applies equally to, Israel and its war against Hamas, Israel defending itself against the effectively almost endless countries that it's surrounded by that hate it and want to see it destroyed and all of its people killed, if they apply it equally across the board and consistently, I can respect that. I'm not so sure that, taking that argument all the way to the extreme is super intelligent or insightful. I think that, it makes sense to have that opinion to some degree, where you draw the line, and I guess that's what that back and forth was about, right? Where do you draw the line on foreign aid? But if someone's saying we shouldn't be sending money to aid Israel in this war because we shouldn't be sending money to anyone, we should be spending the money on the inside of this country or outside of it, but directly on the things that people inside of this country need, and that's the argument, I can respect that. That's fair enough. At least in terms of it, being a legitimate argument that's being made in good faith. Obviously there's a limit to how far you can take that before it becomes self-defeating and impractical, but that's a separate conversation, a separate debate. Even people who are not going to go as far as that, people who are not going to go as far and say we shouldn't give any foreign aid anyway, there does have to be a line that's drawn somewhere, right? America can't just take all of its taxpayer dollars every year and just give it all away to all the people around the world who have needs and not have anything left here. There does have to be a line drawn somewhere, right? Giving charity is nice, supporting other people is nice, but there has to be a cost-benefit analysis that's done here. If someone gives away all their money to charity and then they can't buy food for their own children the next morning and they have to go hungry because they gave it away to charity, well, charity's noble and nice, but that was not an ethical thing to do because their own children are their first and foremost responsibility, right? So it's perfectly reasonable to have a debate about where exactly we draw that line, how much foreign aid we give, how much we don't give, right? And then the other side, another second side of the debate also is that, and this was what the gentleman on the left side of the screen was arguing, is that this foreign aid is not really foreign aid. It's more money that's being spent to protect and support America's interests because it's in the best interest of this country for Israel to be a strong, secure, and safe place. So, both sides of that debate are, I would say, at least reasonable and can be, to the extent that they can be made in good faith. And now, back to the point that he makes at the beginning of the video, people love to say, oh, ceasefire, do you not want a ceasefire? How can you not want a ceasefire? There needs to be a ceasefire. As if a ceasefire, by definition, is some moral good or it's necessarily an ethical objective that we should be working towards, without understanding that in order to make that argument, you have to first define what ceasefire means and understand the ramifications of a ceasefire in this context. And like he says, there was a ceasefire on October 7th in the morning at 6 a.m., whatever time before this all started. There was a ceasefire. There was a ceasefire that had been in place. And then October 7th happened. And Israel is never the one who initiates a breach of a ceasefire. So basically what ceasefire means is, okay, so now Israel and its military are just going to sit around and watch and not do anything for as long as everybody else, plays nice above the surface, while meanwhile in all of those tunnels that they've built underground with all the foreign aid that could and should have been used to feed the people of Gaza, that foreign aid instead has gone to build tunnels underground and then is being used to replenish and restore all of their stocks of weapons and ammunition, etc. And then that remains the status quo until they decide it's time to do it again. And then they break the ceasefire again. There was a ceasefire. And ceasefire produced October 7th. So right now, a ceasefire with Hamas is not a moral good. It's not an ethical objective or outcome. The only moral outcome here, the only ethical objective is the absolute eradication of Hamas. Hamas has to be relegated to the dustbins of history, period, end of story. That is the one and only moral outcome that needs to be pursued here. Ceasefire sounds beautiful and lovely and so nice, but it's not. Ceasefire in this context, a ceasefire with Hamas, just means a chance for them to regroup and replenish until they decide to breach the ceasefire again on their terms when they think it suits them, like they've done every single time. So no, sorry, no ceasefire. Just bye-bye Hamas. That's all.